Chapter 7. Cocaine. A few key facts. Cocaine is found in the coca leaf of Western South America. It's a stimulant. It's a popular illicit drug in the UK, the second most used after cannabis. Currently it's dangerously pure and deaths from cocaine are on the rise. Leaves can be chewed, powder can be swallowed or snorted, crack cocaine can be smoked or injected. Timescale varies by method of consumption. The quicker it reaches the brain, the quicker it wears off. Some effects include increases in confidence, heart rate, body temperature, and it can cause insomnia and heart palpitations. Cocaine has something of a reputation. If you ask people to name a hard drug, cocaine might be the first they think of. An intoxication on cocaine is often used as shorthand for any loud, irritating group of people you might encounter. Oh, I saw a load of coked-up businessmen on the bar. Whether every loud, confident group of posh men are really on cocaine is up for debate, but that's the reputation the drug has. Cocaine is certainly one of the more popular illicit drugs in the UK. The European Monitoring Centre for Drugs and Drug Addiction estimate that 2.7% of UK 16 to 59-year-olds took cocaine, with 2.6% of those taking powdered cocaine between 2017 and 2018. Cocaine is also an illicit drug that constantly makes headlines in the UK press. At the end of 2018, the then Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, pledged to crack down, no pun intended, on middle-class cocaine users, blaming them for the rise in knife crime being seen in London and elsewhere in the UK. I was invited on the BBC's Victoria Derbyshire programme to talk about this at the time. I pointed out that evidence collated by the Advisory Council for the Misuse of Drugs has shown that punitive punishments for drug use are not very effectual in getting people to stop, even if the middle class was a sensible target for intervention, which it might not be. The people who need the most help are the people experiencing the most harms from drugs, which probably isn't that group. Earlier in 2018, the media was awash, with stories about cocaine getting into London's rivers and streams and impacting on endangered eel populations that live there, causing them to become hyperactive, to suffer muscle wasting, and impacting their gills and their hormone levels. And while I was writing this chapter, Noel Gallagher made headlines by declaring that cocaine is boring. Thanks for your input, Noel, but sadly the press disagreed and wrote a frankly unnecessary number of articles about his statement. But alongside these puff pieces, deaths from cocaine in England and Wales are at the highest level since data began being collected in 1993. What is it? Cocaine, or benzoyl methylecgonine to give it its chemical name, is a drug that can be taken in many forms via a number of different methods. And this can mean that the same underlying substance can have a variety of effects. Broadly, cocaine is a stimulant, an upper, so it'll do all the things that stimulants will do. But a person chewing coca leaf will have a markedly different intoxication experience and risk of dependence compared to someone inhaling crack cocaine vapour. Similarly, the appeal of snorting powder cocaine might not be the same as the appeal of crack or of coca leaf. What are the different types of cocaine? Cocaine itself is found naturally in coca leaves, which grow in Western South American countries such as Bolivia, Argentina, and Peru. The leaves of the plant are mixed with lime, by which I mean calcium hydroxide or calcium carbonate, rather than coca leaves with a twist of lime, or another alkaloid substance that allows it to be absorbed through the lining of the mouth. The leaves are chewed into a wad which a person will tuck in between their gum and cheek and leave there, sucking the juices out of it. Coca leaves can also be steeped in hot water to make coca tea, a drink particularly popular in the Andes mountain range. Indeed, climbers have reported being encouraged to drink it to reduce altitude sickness, although whether it is effective in this regard has never been properly investigated. Cocaine can also be extracted from coca leaves, and it is in these forms that cocaine is more commonly used around the rest of the world. If someone refers to cocaine, they'll usually be talking about cocaine hydrochloride, or powder cocaine. Cocaine prepared in this way is usually snorted. Nasal insufflation is the scientific term for this, fact fans. Often this will happen through a rolled-up banknote or another small tube. Some people use biros with the ink part removed or unused tampon applicators. The cocaine powder will coat the inside of the nasal passage and be absorbed through the mucous membranes into the bloodstream. What isn't absorbed will then be picked up in the mucus and drip down the back of a person's throat to be swallowed. Cocaine can also be prepared for smoking, actually heating and inhaling the vapour rather than burning and smoking. and injecting. A final preparation of cocaine is called freebase. This is cocaine sulfate, cocaine without the hydrochloride found in powder cocaine. It's consumed in the same way as crack cocaine, and often the terms are used interchangeably. Crack cocaine is broadly similar to freebase, although usually contains adulterants, so is less pure. It's often prepared using baking soda and water. It looks like an oily or plasticky, waxy rock, why it's often called a rock of crack. Crack is usually smoked through a small glass pipe. It can also be injected if dissolved in an acid. The method by which cocaine is consumed will impact on how quickly it gets into the brain, and therefore how soon after consumption a person will start to feel intoxicated. As you might expect, injecting a drug means it reaches the brain very quickly, within seconds. The length of intoxication is correspondingly short, with the acute effects of cocaine wearing off within about 15 to 20 minutes. Inhaling a vapour is almost as fast. The vapour is inhaled into the lungs and so is transferred into the bloodstream within a few seconds. If a person snorts cocaine, it takes slightly longer to get into the bloodstream. An individual will start to feel the effect approximately 5 minutes after snorting. When cocaine is snorted, it also constricts the blood vessels in the nose, meaning absorption is slightly slowed. Intoxication via this method tends to last around half an hour. Chewing coca leaves is the slowest method by which to consume cocaine, taking about half an hour to enter the bloodstream, and the intoxication experience, while milder, will last substantially longer. What are the short-term effects? Intoxication on cocaine can make an individual feel confident and upbeat. It's a stimulant, so it can increase alertness, as well as causing feelings of euphoria, a clear head, and a good mood. Like other stimulants, cocaine increases an individual's heart rate and raises their body temperature. It's also an appetite suppressant, like other stimulants. As a person increases their dose of cocaine, it can cause them to become sweaty, to get a dry mouth, and there's some suggestion it can make individuals more aggressive. This could be linked to increased feelings of confidence or feelings of invincibility, a lack of social inhibitions a person might feel when sober. As the dose increases yet further, people can experience headaches, insomnia, and nausea. Individuals who snort cocaine can experience nasal irritation. Individuals who inject cocaine sometimes report a sudden tinnitus accompanying the initial intoxication experience. Taking too much cocaine can be extremely dangerous. A person might experience palpitations or even seizures. Hypothermia, where body temperature increases, is also a possibility, as well as a heightened risk of a heart attack. Psychologically, paranoia, hallucinations, and panic attacks are possible. What are the longer-term effects? Long-term use of cocaine confers a number of risks on an individual. If a person is snorting cocaine, they run the risk of lasting damage to their nasal passage and septum, including painful nasal ulcers, and the potential of a perforated septum, discussed in more detail later. People inhaling cocaine vapour are at risk of respiratory problems, including asthma and emphysema. Not only that, but the melting point of crack is extremely high, and crack pipes are often short because the vapour only remains potent for a short amount of time. This means the pipe and vapour are extremely hot when they meet a person's mouth, so there is a risk of blistering on the lips from regular inhalation of crack. There is evidence that cocaine is addictive, but as you might expect, how likely a person is to experience dependence will be influenced by a number of factors, including the method of consumption. A usual rule of thumb is that the quicker a substance takes effect and the shorter the intoxication experience, the higher the risk of developing dependence. Smoking or injecting cocaine regularly is therefore more risky in terms of dependence than snorting, which is itself more risky than chewing coca leaves. People who stop taking cocaine after using it regularly report experiencing withdrawal symptoms, including low mood and irritability. Long-term use of cocaine has been linked to a number of mental health problems, including depression, anxiety, and paranoia. Much like the links between mental health and other substances, these associations are seen in observational studies, so it's difficult to say with any certainty whether the cocaine use causes the mental health problems or whether people with mental health problems are more likely to use cocaine. It's also perfectly possible that both of those statements could be true. Animal studies have found some evidence that chronic cocaine use might cause brain damage, particularly to the white matter of the brain. In humans, this has been harder to research. There's some suggestion that this brain damage might occur because cocaine narrows blood vessels, so might reduce blood flow in the brain. This narrowing of blood vessels might also increase a regular user's risk of heart attacks and stroke, although again, the evidence for this is mostly based on anecdote and case reports rather than large-scale studies. It's also possible that liver damage might result if an individual takes cocaine very regularly without allowing their body to recover between uses. As with many substances, cocaine is a drug that is rarely taken on its own. But mixing cocaine with other substances can lead to unexpected risks above and beyond those of each substance individually. Taking cocaine with other stimulants can put extra pressure on the heart and increase the possibility of heart attacks. Taking cocaine with depressants can result in masking, where the stimulant effects of cocaine might hide the depressant effects of something like alcohol or heroin. This can make overdosing more likely, as a person isn't able to assess how the drugs are affecting them properly. And with alcohol, there is an additional risk. When cocaine and alcohol mix, a byproduct called cocathylene is created. Some researchers have suggested that cocathylene is responsible for increased heart attacks and liver problems in individuals who have co-used alcohol and cocaine for a number of years. Other researchers are not so sure. Because taking cocaine and alcohol can mask the effect of the other, it might be the case that people who use both, on average and over the course of their drug-taking lives, consume higher levels of both cocaine and alcohol, and so these increased harms might be due to higher doses rather than this new chemical. Either way, taking both together increases the risk above and beyond taking either substance by itself. Another popular combination with high risks is known as a speedball, mixing cocaine and heroin and either snorting or injecting the combination. As we've discussed, mixing a stimulant and a depressant can mask the effect of both, meaning a person can feel more alert and awake than they usually would after taking heroin because of the stimulant effect of cocaine. This makes the risk of overdose more likely. Speedballs have been implicated by the media in a number of high-profile deaths, including River Phoenix, John Belushi, and Philip Seymour Hoffman. That said, the media can often present a somewhat warped picture of risk of harm from substances. Individual cases can mislead, as there may be other underlying risks not known about that could also be at play. We know very little about the number of individuals who mix cocaine and heroin in this way, and so it's hard to estimate the level of risk very accurately. From our understanding of how stimulants and depressants interact, we can certainly be sure that mixing them will increase the risk of overdose, and overdosing on cocaine or heroin can have severe, potentially fatal consequences. Cocaine can be particularly dangerous to use for pregnant women. Cocaine use during pregnancy has been linked to problems with the fetus, such as low birth weight, smaller head circumference, and generally being smaller. It's also linked to risk of miscarriage and of sudden infant death syndrome. However, given that it's rare for people to use only one drug, it's difficult to be really sure how many of these effects are specific to cocaine. In the 1980s, there was a large panic around crack babies, an awful term, with a suggestion that women dependent on crack cocaine were giving birth to babies that would have reduced intelligence and social skills. This moral panic seems to have been hugely exaggerated. But there do seem to be some mild impairments in children exposed to cocaine in utero, such as behaviour problems and small deficits in some aspects of information processing and attention. The possibility of confounding is high here, though. Children regularly exposed to cocaine during pregnancy are likely to have different upbringings to those who are not in lots of ways, and this might also impact on their behaviour and attention. Myths and misconceptions. There are a whole load of myths and misconceptions that exist around cocaine, probably because it's one of the most commonly used illicit drugs, usually ranking second in popularity after cannabis. Here are some of the more common ones. The addictive properties of cocaine depend on method of use. This is fairly accurate, as we've already discussed. You're at a higher risk of developing dependence from cocaine use if you inject or smoke it, although snorting it also means the drug will get into your bloodstream quite quickly, meaning risk of dependence is still rather high for that method of consumption. So this isn't a myth, it's true. If you use cocaine once, you can or will become addicted. This is said of a lot of substances, but even the highest estimates suggest that of people who use cocaine, about 50% will develop addiction. And most estimates are substantially lower than that, meaning it's likely that at least half of all people who try cocaine will not develop dependence. You can't become dependent on a substance if you have never tried it, and everyone who develops dependence will have used a substance at least once. That's fairly obvious. And the first time experiencing a substance can be a significant step on the pathway towards addiction. but it's by no means guaranteed. Addiction is defined as repeating and persisting in a behaviour in the face of potential or actual harm caused by it, and changing your life around it. Clearly, this cannot happen after just one use. This is a myth. Cocaine will rot your septum. The septum is the piece of skin between the two nostril holes in your nose. In 2000 in the UK, the tabloid press posted shocking pictures of an actress in the popular soap opera EastEnders, which seemed to show her septum was missing. Cue headlines about cocaine rotting your nose. Cocaine will not rot your septum, but it can lead to it disintegrating if you are a really heavy cocaine user. If you snort coke regularly, the advice is to wash your nasal passages frequently, though it is also highly advisable to take regular breaks from using cocaine to allow your nasal passages to recover too. So it's a myth. Cocaine sobers you up. While the effects of cocaine on top of alcohol might make a person feel like they're sobering up, this is not the case. Taking cocaine after you've had alcohol might make you feel like you're more sober, but the effects of the cocaine are merely masking the alcohol intoxication. And, as cocaine intoxication lasts for only a short time, once the cocaine wears off, you'll feel just as drunk or even more so if you've carried on drinking. It's a myth. Cocaine is vegan. Although cocaine is made from a plant, that doesn't mean no animals are harmed in its production. Because of its illicit nature, there are no regulations on crop production, and this can mean deforestation and pollution from the dumping of byproducts of cocaine production. There's some evidence, although it's hard to quantify this, that herbicides are used to a higher degree when growing cocaine than when growing other crops in the region where it's grown. So even if you want to argue it's vegan, it's certainly not organic. And it's also not an ethical product, given the huge human and environmental impact associated with cocaine production and distribution. It's unclear whether this is a myth or not. If your white powder numbs your mouth when you dab it on your gums, it's definitely cocaine. MDMA white powder will make your gum feel numb. Ketamine powder will make your gum feel numb. This isn't a good way to distinguish between substances. And a white powder could contain any number of other adulterates. Getting your drugs tested to find out what's in them before taking the drug is the only way to better understand them. This is easier said than done. At the moment, in the UK, at some music festivals, there is an organisation called The Loop, to whom you can take your drugs to be tested. In Wales, there is a postal drugs testing service called Weddinos. It's also possible to buy kits online that can test for the presence or absence of specific substances. However, these can give a false sense of security because they can't tell you everything that's in the powder. These kits only test for the presence or absence of specific substances. Anything else in there will go undetected. So it's a myth. You can't overdose on cocaine. Yes, you absolutely can. It's really dangerous to take too much cocaine and it can be fatal. This is a myth. Does cocaine have any medical uses? Cocaine has a fascinating history. Although used for thousands of years by communities in the Andes Mountains and the Amazon rainforest in the form of coca leaves, cocaine was first extracted from the leaves by scientists in Europe in the mid-1800s. One scientist in Germany noticed that the powder made his tongue feel numb when he tasted it. This seems to be somewhat of a theme, European scientists experimenting on themselves with substances they've extracted from plants. I don't think that it happens so much these days. An ophthalmologist in Austria experimented with the use of cocaine as a local anaesthetic for cataract surgery. The more popular anaesthetics of the time, such as ether or chloroform, had a tendency to make people throw up, so they were not ideal for delicate eye surgery. But cocaine as an anaesthetic did not last long, as patients began dying of accidental overdose in the operating theatre. Sigmund Freud, later famous for an obsession with penises and wanting to have sex with his mother, or something, was very interested in understanding the nature of cocaine before he turned to psychoanalysis. Indeed, his first major publication was entitled Über Coca. In it, he argued that cocaine could be used to treat morphine and alcohol addiction. As you can probably imagine from the contents of this chapter, Freud was not wholly correct in this assumption. Not only did he end up apparently becoming dependent on cocaine for a number of years, he also recommended it to his friend Ernst Fleischl-Marco, who was at the time dependent on morphine. It seems that the cocaine did not help Ernst to reduce or stop his morphine use, and he ended up using both, with some reports suggesting that he was injecting both, the extremely dangerous speedball mentioned earlier. Whether Ernst was able to stop using morphine or cocaine is unclear, but he passed away around 7 years after Freud first introduced him to cocaine, aged 45. Around the same time as cocaine was being investigated for its medical benefits, it was also being marketed as a wellness product. Vin Mariani was red wine and cocaine, again a combination not recommended, developed by a French chemist called Angelo Mariani in 1863. The adverts for it claimed it fortifies and refreshes body and brain, and restores health and vitality, and it became popular across Europe where it was sold. Across the Atlantic in the USA, a pharmacist called John Stith Pemberton founded Coca-Cola in 1886. The beverage was initially made from cocaine and sugary syrup and sold at soda fountains accessible only to white Americans. When the drink became available in bottles in 1899, it was available to anyone, regardless of their race or class. The company removed cocaine from their drinks in 1903, and some claim this was racially motivated. Many newspapers and politicians reported or believed that black people who had taken cocaine were particularly dangerous. This racist view was further evidenced in the 1980s, when crack cocaine use became more common. Punishments for possession of crack were 100 times greater than they were for powder cocaine, which impacted on African Americans as they were more likely to use crack. In 2010, the Fair Sentencing Act reduced this discrepancy, but punishments for crack cocaine possession remained 18 times higher than for powder cocaine.